Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu, joined as always by Jeff and Ed. Guys, I don't know if you felt it, being obviously in the other side of the country, but there was a massive, monumental, seismic activity that apparently took place in Bristol on Friday. So, for those of you that aren't aware of what we're talking about, it was the first of the Women's Rugby World Cup semi-finals. It was the defending champions New Zealand versus Canada. Number three in the world versus number two in the world. And I think going into this, there's obviously like the history of what the Black Ferns have been able to achieve. Six Rugby World Cups, the last two consecutively. And that meant absolutely nothing in the face of these Canadian women. This was, quite honestly, the greatest performance by a Canadian 15s team I have ever seen. We've been talking about, their quick ball speed, their ruck speed, their phase speed. It all came together. This was this was amazing to watch. I know that Canada have beaten New Zealand previously last year, and they tied earlier this year. And, obviously being second in the world, you have this on paper assumption that, number two is going to beat number three. That just makes sense. But the way they beat them, the intensity in which they played, I I was a sat like two tries within 10 minutes, 17-0 up before New Zealand got their first points of the game. Even in the final 20 or 25 minutes when New Zealand picked up two extra tries, at no point did I feel that the Black Ferns were going to turn this around and win. This was Canada's most dominant performance ever, and to do it on such a stage against such an opponent, it is historic. It is phenomenal. This is a game that is worthy of being called Game of the Year across World Rugby, and I say that in full knowledge that we have a Autumn Nation series coming up for the men. This was, unless you were a New Zealand rugby fan, one of the greatest games ever. This was, again, monumental, phenomenal. These women have done their nation proud, and they are eager to do it again when they come to the final. And seeing as they've played, and then seeing the England France game the following day, I don't think England are prepared for what is coming to them. Like, yeah, they've seen it, they know what Canada's tactics are, and this is actually a great point that Squidge Rugby made in his video breakdown of the New Zealand Canada game. You can only really prepare for a team that is as quick and as fast as Canada if you play them on a frequent basis. Or more accurately, other teams play this style of rugby. No one plays this level of total rugby like Canada does. This is it it's so hard to defend. Even in the first half of this game, New Zealand were only able to get an intercept by being massively offside, even though it was never called back, but we won't harp on that. It's I think that everyone should be preparing themselves for what Canada is going to unleash at Twickenham this weekend. But yeah, I cannot give enough plaudits to this team. This was simply the best rugby I've seen in a long, long time. All right, I need to take a break from giving so much praise for a moment. I'm gonna pass it over to you first, Ed. Um, because you always come in and you always bring in the stats. And, you know, one of the main stats that came out of this game that Canada did not concede a penalty until the 60th minute.
I thought it was like almost 65th or something, but yeah, something like that. Yeah. Still, sorry.
Yeah, but obviously, one way to win a game is to not concede many penalties, and certainly Canada did that. But Ed, are there any more interesting stats that you found from this game?
Yeah, yeah, the plaudits are not going to stop with me. I'm just going to keep them rolling here. I also watched that Squidge video that you were mentioning there, and some of the statistical analysis that he was bringing in. Uh, the claim that he made there was this is the greatest World Cup performance of all time, men's and women's. So the ruck speed of Canada was a second faster than any average ruck speed in any World Cup game ever, men's and women's. That shows you the strategy that Canada is employing, and I think Stu, you might be right that I don't know that England is prepared to meet Canada when they're playing with that ruck speed. He highlighted another stat where Canada went through 5 phases in less than 10 seconds. That's not ruck clearance speed. That's phases because Canada are so quick to pick the ball up off the ground when they go into a ruck or offload. Like when we look at the offloads, there was 11 offloads by Canadian players, fully spread across the team. 9 players that had a single offload each. Everybody is playing an offload game. Everybody is playing a pick and go game. That just makes the ruck speed of the Canadian game so fast. And then the other thing that Squidge was going on about was uh, Peltier, the decision making on her behalf was absolutely phenomenal. Like New Zealand was trying to shoot up and get into those passing lanes to try and disrupt that a little bit. She read it so well. Every time a New Zealander was shooting up, she was throwing a dummy and going into gaps. She was finding her players with offloads. So she had a phenomenal game. I saw, after the game was finished, people were saying, oh, yeah, that wasn't an upset because Canada's ranked number 2. Well, going into that game, New Zealand had a 95% winning rate against Canada. They had a World Cup winning streak that went back to 2014. So people trying to say that this wasn't an upset, this was 100% an upset. And it's based on the back of this very, very innovative game plan that Rue has got them playing. And the one thing that I really loved is, and this Squidge mentioned this as well, but it's worth repeating. At the beginning of the game, they talked to the coach Rue and asked him, what does he have to worry about with New Zealand? What concerns does he have about the New Zealand game? And he just had one comment: "I'm not worried about New Zealand." The level of belief that you have to just dismiss that success that New Zealand's had out of hand shows that that team believe they can beat anybody. I'm really looking forward to the final. I based on that game, I think Canada wipes England away.
Hmm. There's one thing I want to mention of like the player of the match, Justine Peltier, is what I've noticed from watching her play scrum half is that she always has a tell when it comes to passing because she'll pick the ball up and then she'll put her hands back to give herself as much momentum as possible and then pass it. And I've noticed this because I've noticed that other players such as Olivia Apps doesn't do it. But one person, and the most important person who has also noticed this, is Justine Peltier. So that when she was throwing all those dummies, she was doing the exact same thing. She was bringing her arms back, indicating she's going to pass. Arms go through, the ball doesn't leave them, and she was able to jot over for the first try. The fourth try, she was able to get the gap, which then led to that incredible offload into the hands of Sophie de Goody. And yeah, and again, it's like Sophie de Goody is an amazing player. She's also been nominated for Women's World Player of the Year. And yet Justine Peltier played the game of her life to string that all together. And yeah, bringing it back to that Squid Rugby video as well, like the trust you have in your players that Peltier was able to spot the gap, knew that she was going to be tackled, and De Goody was able to know what was going to happen next so that she would be able to run onto that ball, clear space in front of her. That is a critical error for any team, never mind the Black Ferns. You do not give Sophie De Goody space. And it all came together 24/7 at half time. And not one of those tries felt like a defensive misstep from New Zealand. It was just Canadian attack just going and going and just finding the gaps and able to pick and go and able to get all this together. Anyway, I'm still giving the plaudits, but Jeff, I'll give you the opportunity to speak as well. Sorry about that.
Well, one of the things Squid said was New Zealand didn't play bad either. It's just Canada was on another level. Uh, yeah, I generally agree with everything both of you guys said. I'm gonna preface this with a bit of an irony. I'm not quite sure I would agree that this was an upset. I think maybe the margin of victory was
Mm,
maybe more surprising. I thought Canada would win. I believe this is also New Zealand's largest defeat in a World Cup, man or woman, ever.
yeah.
I believe that too, which shocked me to be honest. Why I don't think this was upset or anything like that is because I actually think New Zealand, ironically, has been living on a false pretense since the last World Cup. People forget that England played a player down for 63 minutes in that previous World Cup final
Mm,
and they still only lost by 4 points. Like I never believed this was an unstoppable New Zealand Blackburn side. So I honestly thought Canada should have been favored in that semifinal, and obviously they proved that they should have been with
mm.
that performance. Can Canada replicate it this Saturday? I hope so. I really do. I am a bit worried that if maybe that was such a mentally draining victory, it can be hard to get up again. But I also think England, people right now are saying, "Oh, England, well, they're going to be angry about their performance against France." Well, there's a lot of pressure on this England side too at a
Mm,
home World Cup. There's going to be a lot of pressure, and I have read on forums that one of the big, and I'm bringing this up specifically, even though I like the player, is that England's starting nine, Hunt. One of her criticisms that she can be a bit slow at the rocks. And when you compare
mm,
that to Justine Peltier and what we're saying about her, my main concern going in against England, honestly, will be the scrum. I didn't think Canada's scrum was that great against New Zealand. Well,
mm,
well, maybe it's just because the rest of the performance was so great
mm,
that we're just trying to find the negative here. But well, I do think in open play, ruck speed, Canada's forwards are better. I just worry a little bit like if the weather's not cooperating and it becomes one of those games where it's a forward scrum battle that could play to England's hands.
Hey, Jeff, what did you think of this when Canada made substitutions? Because I thought they were a little bit slow there.
I
Menon
thought
looked like
they too.
she was tired when she missed that tackle for New Zealand
Yeah.
to come back into it. What did you think of that?
I actually thought they were late because about the 55 to 70 minute mark, and I'll give credit for Canada there being able to steady the ship. They were because if one team was going to be able to score in bunches, it was going to be the Black Ferns and get back into this game. And I did actually thought they were starting to fall off tackles around the 55, 60 minute mark. And I was starting to get a little concerned. I thought they may have iced the game, and maybe they thought too when they scored first in the second half, which I thought was very important, and Canada did it.
mm,
But then that first all Black Ferns try, honestly, should never have been scored. That was very poor defense, and that's probably my only real criticism of the game, in an otherwise magical performance by Canada. Uh, I think yes, as I just said, I think they allowed Black Ferns back into the game a bit with that play, but then they iced the game by taking that penalty at 75th minute, which was
mm,
also very important, making it a three-score game. That showed their tactical knowledge of the game. They knew that was an
mm,
important 3 points. They didn't need to go to the corner. They didn't need to try to push over a maul to push that scoreline further. They just needed to ice the game, and that's what they
Hmm.
did there. Great game management there by the captain.
Yeah, this is the second game in succession in which Canada have opted to go for the post when they're uh I'll say comfortably ahead. 12 points ahead. That's still two tries at least, one conversion. But yeah, as in no, even if that penalty could have been taken from like the edge of the pitch and it could have gone like massively wide either way, it would have still eaten into the
And
overall game clock
yeah,
and kept the game further and further out of reach for the Black Ferns. Um and yeah, like we said against Australia and like we're saying now, it's a case of why do you need to exert yourself when you're already so far ahead? Now, if there is a team that can score two tries within the final 5 minutes of a game, it is definitely the Black Ferns. Um, but again, the defense held resolute, and even though the clock had gone red and it was just for pride at that point, New Zealand still going for the try, and then the turnover, the kick into touch, and then so begin the celebrations. The emotion on these players when that whistle blew and they knew what had been done and what was yet to come. I mean, it's it's one of these things of like when we were talking about this game on the last episode of yeah, we think that, after everything that's gone on, Canada are gonna win this game and they're gonna go to the final. But experiencing it and witnessing it and seeing what it means to them, I also hope that this isn't Canada's mental final and they pull back um, from their performance of on Friday.
this is where having that extra day off could be huge. Because
Absolute. That is exactly what I was going to mention. It still boggles my mind how in the RFU as like the organizers of this World Cup in terms of how everything gets played is that yeah, they didn't get a say in which of the top four teams are in which pool, but they obviously structure it in a way that England is most likely to reach the final. So, it was expected that France would be making it to the semi-finals. Okay, out of Canada, New Zealand, and France, who would England most like to play? The lowest ranked team? Absolutely. Well, try and set that up. And, it's not just this World Cup, it is every single World Cup that is organized in the way that can most benefit the home nation. So it's par for the course and nothing wrong with that. But I still don't understand why it was England France on the Saturday instead of having them on the Friday so that they would get the extra day to recover. I mean, this is why I'm doing a podcast and not organizing a Rugby World Cup, apparently. But one thing I did notice of that game between England and France in Bristol was that Kevin Rouet was in the crowd watching that. I think he has picked up a few things from this England display that he will be relaying back to the team's strategy and seeing how that all comes together. But yeah, having an extra day to help you recover, help you process your emotions, I think is probably like the most important thing that the players can do because um, triumph or disaster, this was going to continue to this coming Saturday, whether it was for the bronze final or the World Cup final. Um, yeah, I think that this extra day of rest and recovery can definitely strengthen this team. And who knows, maybe Canada become the fourth nation etched into the Women's Rugby World Cup trophy. The one thing that I do want to pick up on, and this was from like Justine Peltier's post-match speech, is that this hasn't just come about from one game. As she said, it's like 3 years in the dark. Now they've come into the light. Personally, I think they've gone from the dark and they've produced a blackout of the Black Ferns. So no matter what happens this Saturday, this is one of the greatest games of rugby I have ever seen. And full plaudits, laurels, commendations, anything I can to this team, to the coaching staff, Shania Twain, why not? Russell Crowe,
Russell Crowe,
apparently, as
yeah,
well.
Even our prime minister's noticed them now.
Yeah.
finally. One other thing I'll say about the whole strategy and the coaching and the whole team is that it's uniquely tailored to women's rugby. I feel like England is still playing a replication of men's strategy, where I
Mm.
feel like the Canadian strategy is uniquely tailored. That quick game, taking advantage of ruck speed and the fact that the rucks are not pressured as much as they are in the men's game. That's a uniquely tailored women's version of strategy. So if they are to do it, it. I think Rouet will go down as one of the great all-time coaches.
I think he is definitely like so they've announced that they're gonna reveal the women's player of the year before they hand out the trophy after the final. They've also announced that they're going to have coach of the year as well. I think that's got Rouet's name all over it. I don't like, yeah, England have gone 32 games unbeaten at this point, and if they win the final, it'll be 33, which will just extend their record. But I don't think any coach has been able to produce such total rugby as Rouet has done. I think that no matter what the result, that's his award, essentially.
Hope so.
I hope so too, and I'll be ready to eat humble pie if I'm completely wrong on the award ceremony. Just before Canada lift the trophy on Saturday. I'm buzzing for this. I encourage everyone to tune in to TSN and watch this game at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. It's going to be phenomenal. And, we've also had a bit of news of women's rugby beyond the Rugby World Cup that has come out this week, and that is that the WXV has been rebranded to the WXV Global Series. So what this means is there's a continuation of 18 national teams, but this time instead of three bands such as WXV 1, 2, and 3, it is now being played across two competitions. The top 12 teams, that includes Canada, will play in a home and away cross-regional model from 2026 to 2028. The teams will play between 4 to 6 fixtures annually in the new September-October test window. The teams 13 to 18, they're going to compete in a funded, centralized annual tournament that will be hosted across a single destination. The crossover fixtures are to take place in 2027 around the British and Irish Lions Women's Tour. Over this 3-year period, there'll be over 100 international matches to be played across the 3-year cycle. Touring unions will retain the commercial rights to the home fixtures, and it is integrated into the Women's Rugby World Cup 2029 qualification pathway, which does not matter to Canada because they have already qualified. Yeah, so the information is pretty slim at the moment. Obviously, there's more important matters in women's rugby. Uh, quite currently. This does seem, though, that Canada could be facing every nation of the women's Six Nations between September and October of next year, which will be fantastic. Briefly, Jeff, what did you make of this news?
Well, it's good to see that more games will be played for all of these women's teams, and hopefully helps grow the game more. And I always like the home and away. In some ways, I almost wish they would show this kind of initiative of getting teams like I'll use tier one versus tier two teams playing each other more often in the
Mm.
men's game too, like that. So I'm all about growing the game and making a more competitive top level.
And Ed, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess they're trying to somewhat replicate what's going to be happening with the global championship that they're bringing in the next couple of years. But just great to have more development. Another interesting stat I just did come across the other day is that the Women's Rugby World Cup has now eclipsed the Men's Rugby League World Cup in terms of total viewers. So that just basically shows the growth of the women's game, and as many tournaments, as many games as they can get for these teams, the better.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to bring it back to good old North America because, we still had the final round at the Pacific Nations Cup to take place. This was for the bronze medal. This was between Tonga and Canada. Um, you know, Tonga, Canada, they were in this fixture last year. This was for fifth and sixth. Thankfully, they're in the bronze medal this time round. And, similar results in terms of scoreline of who came out top at the end of the day. Final score Tonga 35, Canada 24. We had tries for Owaru, Gallagher, and Nelson, who converted all three of the tries and also got a penalty goal as well. Definitely disappointing not to have been able to secure third in the PNC, but considering how Tonga have demolished Canada in the past, especially in that two-match series in Tonga in the build-up for the 23 World Cup, it was, definitely an improvement. I think that the from the outside looking in, Stephen Meehan has done his first job, which was to qualify the men for Australia 2027. Now he can be having the focus of let's bleed the young players, let's get them test experience. The losses aren't as important now, so the pressure's off. So what we just need to do is give these guys more time together. Um, give Jack Shaw and Austin Creighton their first caps, and see how they perform as a unit, and then come the games in November, we'll make a decision there. Ed, what did you make of this result?
Yeah, I think pretty as predicted. The one bright light I thought in there was Brock Gallagher. I think he might have put himself into contention to be the number 1 9 for the team. So it was good to see him playing well. Yeah, just a Tonga. Patrick Pellegrini, their fly half, I think is one of the best fly halves in the world. That's completely underrated. So I think he got a couple of tries, which just shows his quality. So pretty, I think, as predicted, result there for Canada.
And Jeff, what did you make of the game?
The only I'll mention is not so much about the game itself, but it just seems like this team is playing with more enthusiasm and less quit than before. I think there's a different aura on this team, and as you said, they're bloody young players. So I think even though we've only won one game so far this year, I think the team is trending in the right direction, and I'll be very interested in seeing the November squad.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I think we're all eager to see how they do when they have their tour of Europe later this year. But something that has come out into through the rumor mill, of course, nothing is confirmed at this point, is that for MLR 2026, it is intended to take place next year, which
The rumor. That's the rumor.
that's also the rumor as well. But there seems to be a rumor going around that the league is going to change its international player roles, not only just in terms of reducing the number of international players that can be in a match day 23, but also categorize Canadian players as international and have the focus therefore be on USA eligible players. Jeff, you said that you wanted to speak some words on this.
First, I'm not
What's
quite sure.
yours?
Yeah, if just making it like American Development League, for lack of a better term, would actually have the positive impact that they think it could have on the league, whoever's making this decision.
Hmm.
I can understand dropping like the number of imports per team because of the teams have shrunk. Adding Canadians to that 5 player per team, I don't think makes much sense. And there's a lot of other comments to make here because first off, they've done the draft, and I think 3 Canadians got drafted by American teams. And
Mm.
now you're making this announcement after that draft. How will those teams feel? What about Canadian players that already signed for next season? Because some of them signed 2, 3 year deals. Are they suddenly imports or are they going to be grandfathered in? And I know that a lot of American posters and American MLR commentators are saying, well, Canada needs to front up and, get a team organized to put in the league. Here's my response. 4 teams have folded so far in MLR this offseason alone. Why would any investor put money into this league at this point? These people are also business people. I mean, the most logical solution I can think of, if they're so determined to go to this import quota and making Canadians internationals in that regard, is World Rugby funding a Canadian team maybe for 1 or 2 years, and say Canadian investors have to take it over just to
Mm.
stabilize the league. I mean, that's possible the only solution I can get. I think it's very short-term thinking there. I know Scott Lawrence went on at an interview and cried for a few minutes about developing Canadian, or sorry, American players. Still one of the weirdest things I've seen. But like it's just very short term. Is it very short term decision making here, I think, if this rumor comes out to be true.
Ed, do you have anything to say to this?
Yeah, I mean, just having spoken to quite a few of the MLR owners through my time, they were always interested in the overseas players. Which overseas players were they allowed to buy? Who they could get? That was a big thing amongst the owners around bringing those players. And so it's obviously partly a cost cutting exercise. They're trying to reduce the cost for everybody overall, which is probably a good idea given at how high the teams run. But I think a lot of the owners like to get those players in because they generate interest. They generate fans across the country. So I won't comment on the Canadian side. I think that is short sighted for sure, but the international side as well. We've seen that in the Japan League as well, the reduction of international players there as well. So maybe that's just the way leagues are going.
Mm. I will agree with you, Jeff, that like Scott Lawrence was making this spiel on a podcast. And if I had been the head coach of a team that was expected to qualify in the first round of Rugby World Cup qualifying for the men's team, and I'd had 3 to nearly 4 years in the role, and I got upstaged by a guy who hasn't even been in the role for a few months, and a player that came back from France and scored 4 tries in front of me. And now people were asking about my reputation as a coach and where I can get talent from. Yeah, I point the finger at anyone but myself as well. That's
Don't forget that's also Mian's first international coaching job.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, I mean, maybe we have to do a bit of self-reflection, Scott. Maybe. I don't know. C'est la vie. You qualified last week. It's okay. We can let bygones be bygones, and we'll all move past this. Yeah, we still have to wait on whether MLR will have Canadian players as domestic next year, but we still have rugby coming up. As we mentioned, it is the Women's Rugby World Cup Finals this weekend. The bronze final, which will be between New Zealand and France, and the more important game, the Canadian game, the World Cup final, where they'll face off against the hosts, England. Again, that game is 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time, available on TSN. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out our episodes as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast on Spotify and on YouTube at The Rouge Rugby. And we're also available across social media, including Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at WP Rugby Jeff.
And Ed, where can people find you?
Facebook and Instagram, rugby101_2025.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Jeff, Ed, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.